Welcome everyone again to the Learning to Birth webinar series, where we interview some of the world's most interesting and inspiring thought leaders on birth and pregnancy and the postpartum. And today we have with us Chantal Traub. Welcome, Chantal.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes. So everybody, Chantal is a yoga teacher, doula, childbirth educator, and creator of Pushing Power. Would you like to tell us about your journey and how you came to create Pushing Power?
Yeah, absolutely. So working and assisting births for 17 years here in the New York metro area. I just found from going to hundreds and hundreds of births that often birthers were often underprepared for the second stage of labor, the pushing part. And what I would find is that not often would they push really forcefully into their faces or into the abdomen, creating a diastasis, or if they had one already, making it worse, or really pushing forcefully into the pelvic floor, and sometimes creating unnecessary damage. And I just found that we had to find a better way to help prepare these moms. And at the same time, as a yoga teacher, some of my older yoga students, just hear the dog in the background, that's so cute.
Do you want me to, hang on, let me pause.
So what I found from going to hundreds and hundreds of births is that women were often underprepared for the second stage of labor, the pushing part. And what I would find is that they would often push really forcefully up into their faces, creating broken blood vessels, or really forcefully into the abdomen, creating a diastasis, or if they had one already, making it worse, or pushing really forcefully down into the pelvic floor and often creating unnecessary damage. And I'd often mention it to the OBs or midwives that I worked with, shouldn't we prepare our moms better? I just felt, shouldn't we plan ahead of time? And the answer that I would often get is that women will figure it out on the day of. Somehow they'll figure it out, and you really only have to do it once, because the next time it's so much easier. So that may be true, but not always. Because often I would find is that moms may run out of time, or they may end up with an episiotomy or vacuum or forceps or even a C-section. And at the same time, some of my older yoga students would share with me that often happens if you're a doula. People find out you're a doula, oh, let me tell you about my birth. And often it would be like the amazing birth story, but that they just want to share with someone that will get it. But often it would be about a traumatic or very disappointing birth. And what I would often hear is that even moms that had their kids 10, 15 years ago would share with me that they sometimes leak if they jump or sneeze, or that they have some type of pelvic tailbone pain or discomfort, or even a prolapse. And what I began to realize is that as our bodies change, a lot of those obstetric events from the past catch up with us. And, pushing is often the shortest part of labor, but if things go awry, they have such long-lasting repercussions. And I just felt like there's got to be a better way to prepare our moms. And this is what pushed me really to create my class, Pushing Power, because I really want to empower families really ahead of time to prepare for, the stamina of labor, but also be able to release and let go, to let the baby out, and really work with my own clients individually, like what is going on in their lives and in their bodies, to help prepare them for specifically second stage of labor.
Sounds great. What do we need to know then about the pushing part that we just are unlikely to know?
Yeah, so my approach often is we often think, okay, what do we need to do as the moms? And our bodies are designed to do what they need to do. I think our culture and our lifestyle plays a certain part in this. But I like to take the approach to the baby and think about what does the baby have to go through in order to be born? Because often we're thinking what do I need to do? But if we can take our attention to where's the baby at? What does the baby do? What what physiological movements does the baby have to go through in order to come into the pelvis, through the pelvis and out of the pelvis, then we can kind of think about how we need to move or adjust or prepare our bodies ahead of time. So, you know, we know that, that in first-time pregnancies, the uterus is, you know, more curved on the left side and angled more straight down on the right. And so just towards the end of the pregnancy, we want our babies coming down into the pelvis in an optimal way. So starting off while they're still pregnant towards the end of the pregnancy, thinking a lot about that. So I work a lot with my clients, and when I teach a lot to thinking about positioning ahead of time to encourage the baby to come into birth ready position. And often, you know, I will say, if you want to move the baby, move the mother. So we want our baby coming down following the curve of the uterus, because it is more curved on the left side. What often happens though is the baby comes down more on the right side. We know that it might just extend its head and then show a much more wider circumference. Or if the baby comes down, say on the right, there's nothing encouraging the baby to kind of tuck its chin in towards its chest. So we want the baby to tuck its chin in towards its chest, you know, as it moves through the cervix, you know, opening up the cervix, because then it will lead with the more malleable part of the baby's head and the narrowest part of the baby's head. But as it comes down into the pelvis, because the baby's really free to move around when it's not in the pelvis, and as it comes down, it's coming into a more narrower space, and that leads to the baby's rotation. So there's a lot of support, encouragement, and education ahead of time, just to encourage the baby to start coming in. Whoops. Leading with the narrowest part of its head, ideally. And also towards the end of the pregnancy, we want our baby to come down into the brim of the pelvis. So, you know, for everyone out there, I think we all know about our pelvises, but we just go over it again, that it's made up of 4 bones. We have our 2 iliums on either side that wrap around and join at the pubic symphysis. And then we have our sacrum and our tailbone, and these join at the 2 sacral iliac joints. We do have a little joint right at the coccyx, but in my understanding, this tends to fuse at around age 30, which is actually quite interesting, because here in New York City, a lot of my clients are in their mid-30s. So that's just interesting to keep in mind. But these sacral iliac joints allow for the counter nutations and the nutations, the opening up of the pelvis, so that we can make space for the baby to come into the pelvis and then out of the pelvis. But as the baby comes down into the pelvis, we want the baby leading with the most malleable part of its head, and come down into the pelvis, just into the brim, ideally before labor starts. And then with the surges, with the contractions, that helps the baby move down. And as the baby comes down and starts entering a more narrower channel near the middle of the pelvis, because if we look at our pelvis, it's wider at the top from side to side and narrower from sacrum to pubis. And if we look at our baby, it's narrower from ear to ear, but wider from the back of the head to the front. So the baby will spin before it goes into labor, turn one side or the other, and then ideally come in following that curve of the uterus. And as it comes down lower into the pelvis and comes towards the middle of the pelvis, marked by the 2 ischial spines. And the interesting part about that, because that's where the deep layers of the pelvic floor attach. The pelvic diaphragm attaches at around the S3, S4, and around the middle of the pubic symphysis at these ischial spines. But as the baby comes down to the middle of the pelvis, it's narrower between those 2 ischial spines. And ideally, this baby's encouraged to turn to face its mother's back. And here its head may come up against the pubic symphysis, encouraging the baby to further tuck its chin in towards its chest as it comes up against the sacrum. As the baby comes against the sacrum, it has the ability to move the sacrum out of the way if there's an opportunity to move the sacrum out of the way. So as the baby comes down onto that deep pelvic diaphragm, a supple, toned, well-balanced pelvic floor will aid in that rotation. Right, makes sense. So as the baby comes down, tucking its chin in, moving that sacrum out of the way, continually tucking its chin in, it now has to be able to pass this pubic arch and the two ischial tuberosities, the sit bones, and past the little tailbone, and that's where the perineum, the superficial muscles of the pelvic floor, attach. So here, ideally, the baby then extend its head, slide across the perineum, and in a mom that does not have an epidural, she'll feel that strong burning sensation. It's usually felt as a burning sensation, and that's her cue to yield and blow itty-bitty birthday candles as the perineum stretches and thins and around the baby's head. So then the head is born. Then the shoulders have the opportunity to spin on the perineum. And then one shoulder is born and the other shoulder is born. And then the sacrum will extend, right? Because the baby's been in a state of flexion for all of the labor. The head now extends and the sacrum extends, and then the legs extend, and then the baby does this kind of placing movement as it kicks off the fundus. One shoulder's born, the other shoulder's born, the baby continues to turn, and then. So if we think about...
It's incredible.
Sorry?
It's incredible, isn't it?
No, it's amazing. I love it. It's really great. So the baby has these reflexes that it needs to go through in order to be born. So if we start thinking about where the baby is, you know, towards the end of the pregnancy, and trying to, you know, we can only encourage the baby, we can't force anyone, but we will encourage the baby as much as possible to start coming to a birth-ready position so that it allows it to come down into the pelvis, ideally before labor starts, and then complete those rotations and reflexes. So I think just bringing that attention. And, you know, we know the baby not only has to navigate the bones of the pelvis, it needs to be able to navigate, you know, all the soft tissue, the ligaments, the muscles, fascia, pelvic floor, rectum, you know, bladder. So, should I continue? So I think it's also important to explain, like to my students and my clients, like, what is the pelvic floor? What is the function of the pelvic floor? And we know that it's made up of 3 layers, but many muscles that have different layers and different directions of pull. And the pelvic floor's main role is to manage continence, right? And not only, though, does it have to manage continence, it has to manage load and movement. So we want to be able to support our pelvic floor, that it carries us through the rest of our life, really being able to manage those important functions in a functional way. So then it's about, you know, helping the mom really tuning into her body and finding her own internal power and her own internal instinct to be able to move in a physiological way, so that's supporting the baby's own physiological movements.
Yes.
And I know it's easier than done.
What are some of the things that we can do to protect our perineum as we give birth? What preparation do we need?
Well, I think, I'm just pop these down. I think also understanding, like, what is second stage of labor? Like, so to understand it before we start thinking about preparing it as well. Because we know that, you know, second stage of labor is defined as, like, the cervix is 10 centimeters until the baby's born. But there's more than that. We start pushing just because we're 10 centimeters. Right, so we know as like birth keepers that often as the body gets closer to pushing, the contractions or the surges may space out. And in the birth world, we call it the resentful phase. But what's going on? Maybe the uterus needs time, you know, to adjust around the baby. Maybe, you know, the uterus is taking a rest, so that's a great opportunity for the birther to, you know, take a nap or get into water, the opportunity to get into warm waters just to soften the pelvic floors would be great. Showers, but even just resting, because, you know, when it's time to push, like you'll see the mom might be completely asleep and then suddenly she's like, okay, she's up and she's like, my baby's coming. So it's not like you'd miss it, you know, so just really giving that opportunity for the mom to really rest. So it's really like in the first stage of labor, there's different phases, you know, there's, like it is in second stage. So there's a more passive resting phase, and then there's a more active participatory phase. What else might be needing to happen when the contractions may, you know, just space out, or the mom's not feeling so much urge, is that the baby might need to complete its final rotations. So, you know, maybe the baby's still needing to extend its head. Maybe the baby's still needing to be able to rotate all the way through. So to bring our attention to what does the baby need to complete its rotations may help with that process. So if everything's going okay with the mom and the baby, of course we're always checking in. Is the mom okay? Or is the baby okay? Because, you know, sometimes there's indications like for the health of the mom, this baby needs to be born quickly, or for the health of the baby, this baby needs to be sooner. And then of course we dig deep and help the baby out. But I often really think about it is that anywhere from 10 centimeters until you've seen baby's hair, like the hair, it's like, you know, you sometimes the person gets checked, oh, the head's right here, it's on the perineum. Or like you can see like little bits of, oh, sorry, I thought I turned that off. Little bits of the baby's hair. And then the active, more participatory phase is that either the mom's feeling strong surges that she can work with, or a lot of pressure that nobody really needs to tell her what to do, or the baby is visible until the head is crowning. And then the way that we manage crowning is a little bit different to help driving the baby down. And then ideally for crowning, then we want to be able to really yield and slow the birth of the head.
Beautiful. You're a doula as well as a childbirth educator. What sort of experience do your clients have with you?
Yeah, no, I am a doula. It's going to be 17 years in February.
Wow.
Consistently. So what do they experience? So I think it's important to work, you know, with a whole person. So when I work with my clients, I definitely take their own individual like history and how that may relate to birth. And I'm thinking about, and we're talking about and processing some of their fears, their beliefs, their hopes, their goals, their vision for their birth. And then we're looking at things as well as like what's their level of activity, what's their sleep patterns, what types of medications may they be on, what's their nutrition like. And then look at them in movement. So as a yoga teacher, I really feel like I look at bodies in space, moving in space. So we're looking at functional movement. How are they sitting? How are they standing? How are they moving through space? How are they carrying themselves? So we do look at alignment and posture. And then I also kind of deep dive into, you know, what did you spend as, you know, in your college days? What did you do? You know, what activity did you do in school? What did you do in young adulthood? And what are you kind of doing now? And then try and add on or adjust, you know. And so if some of my clients are like, you know, I danced right through school and I did gymnastics as a kid and then I horse rode on weekends, then I know that we're going to be doing a lot of release work as well, you know.
That was me. Yep. They told me they told me when I was having my first baby, oh, you'll be, you know, you've got too much rigidity there. You'll be not be able to let your baby out. I was like, what? So I went and tried to do all this work about opening the pelvis, but I had no clue. There was no one that could help at that point. But yeah, that's definitely a real thing. Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I think, and you're in Australia, right? So, I mean, you know, I think it also varies city to city. I think a lot of the New York City moms are like, go, 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 and they take a lot on their high stress levels. Maybe in the Midwest, or I was thinking in Australia, it's like more chill, like, I don't know, but maybe not. You know, here we pound in the subway stairs and cement pavements as well on a daily basis. So I think one has to look at everything. But yes, if you've danced your whole life and, you know, we always think that we need to strengthen. I think that's often what the go-to is. Oh, I need to strengthen. Like, I often will have like postpartum women come to me like, oh, I need to strengthen. But do you? You know, because maybe it's a combination, or maybe there's more release work, or let's, you know, see which, you know, areas of the body we need to strengthen and which we need to work more on releasing and mobilizing and lengthening. But
That's beautiful.
So in your situation, were you able to do a lot of release work ahead of time?
I don't know. The baby came out anyway, just fine. I think they were just a little, you know, just trying to find things to nitpick. Really, it was all fine.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I mean, it's hard because where's the evidence in this? You know, we have a lot of it, we all have our own stories that we tell ourselves. I can only say as a practitioner, I see what that works. I put the pieces of the puzzle together. If that works, I try that. If that doesn't work, you know, we try something different. What I did notice at early years of my practice is often I would see, for example, C-sections for a posterior baby. And often I would talk about that ahead of time with the midwives and things that I would work with, but the baby will turn at the end. It will turn, and yes, babies often do turn at the end. They do. I feel like big babies and little babies, they do turn at the end, but I can't rely on just waiting for that because so many other things come into play, and we might not get that end. You know, so I'll give you an example. I was recently with a client in labor. And she had gotten an epidural. The baby was in a great position at the beginning of the labor, and then it kind of, well, we didn't know then actually that it was in posterior, but her body was showing that there were signs to push, and her provider checked her, and she was like, okay, let's give it a try. But every time she pushed, the baby's heart rate went down, which is not uncommon when you're on your back. Because that presses a lot on the maternal blood vessels. But anyway, she was like, I don't think this is going to work. You guys can try. I'm going to go see if there's an OR open, and I'll come back. My client was devastated. I mean, she'd labored like all day, all night, and now she was at, you know, now it's time to push. So I said, you know, don't give up. We have time. She's left, and let's definitely try and see what we can do. And I asked the nurse in the room, I said, can you help me? Let's get her onto her hands and knees to give the baby a break. And then I wanted to try and think about things. And so I really needed the nurse to be able to help me because we need everybody on the same page when you're working with an epidural. And she helped my client get actually onto her hands and knees. And so, yeah, with an epidural. So she was on her hands and knees in like a quadricep, right? And when the contraction came, she pushed really hard, and I put my hands on her sit bones really to stabilize that, allow the sacrum and the tailbone to move up and out of the way. And she pushed hard, right? So she's pushing, kind of moving me across the room. When that contraction ended, she came up onto her shins, and so that the nurse was able to put the little tachodometer on the uterus and get a good reading of the baby's heart rate. And then she just rested, like in a child's pose. The next contractions would come, and she'd get back up onto her hands and knees. I'd put my hands right behind her, and I would say, okay, go for it. Push me back as hard as you can. And she would like push back, and I'm like using all my might to kind of stabilize her sit bones. The end of that contraction came, she came back onto her shins. The nurse took a reading, of the baby's heart rate. Baby was doing great. She rested. Next contraction came, same thing. Push as hard as you can into my hands, like really giving her as much counter pressure as possible. Anyway, so we must have done that for about 45 minutes. And when her OB came back into the room, the smudge was presenting. She was like, oh my God, what have you done? That baby had completely rotated, right? So it was completely like stargazing. It had completely rotated into an optimal position, like with the facing the mom's back. And then she pushed the baby out with an intact perineum, so not a scratch. I know. So sometimes you can wait, but sometimes you really have to help the baby, you know, like with positions and things, to be able to see if you can kind of guide and help the baby to find its way to come into a position that it could birth. And that also helped release whatever was going on, I think, with maybe there was pressure on the cord or something, which was initially just pushing her back.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So you really help the parents kind of know how to use their body and their whole body to birth, because I think a lot of emphasis is, you know, the mother being told to push just as the baby's crowning, and maybe that's exactly what we don't want, because we want that perineum to have time to stretch. That's what I got told. Thanks very much, guys. We want that perineum to stretch, but really you're talking about the earlier stages of labor and knowing how to engage the whole body to help your baby move into the positions that it wants to. Because of course we are talking about so many muscles there. We're talking about, you know, the abdominal region, our whole core, which is full of, you know, muscle and stabilizing muscles. And yeah, we can definitely use that, to kind of ripple that little baby to where it wants to be and help it in partnership. So that's really, really great that you are teaching these mums how to use their whole body and to get active through the actual, not just pushing the baby out at the end and maybe using those muscles down there and causing trouble to themselves, but instead using their whole body to push the baby into the right position.
Well, that's if the baby, so I always like, you know, what's going on with the baby. If the baby's doing great and the mom, you know, then, you know, hands up, we're not doing anything. But if the baby is not tolerating, then, you know, change positions. Or if you're thinking, okay, this baby is like stargazing. I mean, posterior babies do come out. It's a much longer, harder push and much more stressful on the perineum, right, on the pelvic floor, much more stressful on the perineum. And if the baby's coming, then nobody needs to tell the birthing person what to do, because they're doing it anyway. So that person just needs to feel really safe. And maybe it's like, okay, just pick up your one leg, all right, just, you're doing great, okay, just ease it up. So just a little bit of guidance, but really following the mom's lead. But if the baby's in a posterior position or a little asynclitic, that's, you've got to work really hard to help the baby out. And sometimes I think we underestimate like how much work it is really to help the baby down and out. But yeah, so to go back to that, just about second stage. So there is the descent of the baby as the baby comes down, and then once it's underneath the pubic bone and kind of on the perineum, right? And it's beginning to slide across the perineum and then crown. That's when one definitely wants to just blow or pant. Or what about no pushing or even sounding, because that relaxes, you know, the perineum. So that's also something that one wants to really kind of know and understand ahead of time. So, you know, because we really want to slow down the birth of the baby's head. I often would find that those last couple of tears are always at the end. You really want to slow that down. And yes, you know, like you'll see, like with providers that feel really confident, will allow that perineum time to release and stretch and open. And so the provider plays, you know, a huge role in protecting the perineum, the midwife or OB that you choose to help you with your birth. So definitely talking to them about how are they going to support your perineum. So without an epidural, often the mom will feel that burn-in sensation, and that would be her cue to yield. But if you have a block, like an epidural, then you want your provider to really direct you to slow down and ease the baby out. So that communication is important if you have a block, you know. Yeah.
You've got these beautiful balls and things behind you there. Do you want to talk to us maybe about positions, or maybe about what's available in your beautiful store on your webpage?
Yeah. Just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, like just in terms of positions, because and then yeah, absolutely, I'll give a couple of tips. So I'll just give another example where I think that position can, you know, really help. And it's always the baby, though. Tuning into the baby. The baby's going to let you know if you need to change positions. Like I had a client that was pushing physiologically. She didn't have an epidural, and the baby was really low down. But as she started pushing, the baby's heart rate went down, which is not uncommon as the head gets squeezed down in the birth canal. Yeah. But everybody's got different comfort levels, and some is normal, and some, yes, you have to move a lot faster. But as my client was pushing, her OB said to her, I know that you don't want an episiotomy, but if this baby's not born on the next couple of pushes, I'm going to have to cut you. I'm really sorry. And so I quickly said to the OB who I happen to have a good relationship with, I said, can I have the next couple of pushes with my client? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. You know, how can I help? And I said, let's just turn her all the way onto her left side and all the way towards her tummy, which allowed this right sit bone to release up and out of the way, and of course allow the sacrum and tailbone to move back. And on the next contraction, that baby rotated. And on the next contraction, that baby rotated some more. It's really cool because you can see the head turning. And then on the next contraction, the baby birthed his head and was born with an intact perineum, no episiotomy, no cuts, no tears. That baby was 10 pounds, 12 ounces. So the provider that you choose, you know, it's really important that they are open to you trying different things. And we know that sideline lateral does help for a more gentle birth and does help with the baby's rotations. You know, we have to figure out which way the baby wants to turn, of course. Yeah.
There's so much to know, isn't there? Oh my God. And it feels like you've got a real intuitive sense too, probably coming from your yoga teaching, is, you know, where the body needs to go and what it needs to do for that pelvis to open in that way in that moment that the baby's needing to be in the position it wants to be in.
I think, you know, a practice of observing and reflecting and seeing what works, and if it doesn't work, try something else. I think that definitely helps, but follow the baby's lead. The baby tells you what it needs. You know, and sometimes, you know, sometimes it's clearer than others. But I think tuning into where the baby's at. Now, sometimes if the mom can't get off her back for whatever reason, I often carry like these little water bags with me, and often I have my clients buy them. And if you slide this, I often use it during the first stage of labor, like nice warm pack on the back, on the shoulders. But if she does have to push on like her back, if you slide in this underneath the bottom, it just allows for the movement, because the sacrum needs to move back to create space, especially if there's pressure. So sometimes thinking just creatively, like what can we slide underneath to be able to give that, like firm so it's not, but not too hard. You know, that to be able to give these bones what they need to be able to adjust and move. And so sometimes
you're right, because the bed is so, you know, hospital beds do tend to be quite rigid, and you're lying on that bed. I think the stats in Australia are something like 78% of women are giving birth on their backs in hospitals. And if your pelvis has to open and you're on a rigid bed, I don't know how that's meant to happen. So that's really good that you're thinking creatively. I mean, that's such an easy device, isn't it, to bring in?
Yeah, it's an easy pack. And, you know, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but, you know, generally there's a 90% something epidural rate at a lot of hospitals. So when I teach to my classes, I'm like, think ahead. If you know that you're going to get this and maybe you can't have, you know, room to move, and think about how you can then still support the pelvis in ways that it needs to be able to do, ideally, have the opportunity really to be able to do what it needs to. Okay, yeah, so in terms of like the peanut ball, see where I can sit to be able to. Yeah, so when I'm often thinking for the baby to come down into the pelvis, we want to think about, right, opening up the two ilium. So whatever we can do in positions to kind of like open up those positions. And then as the baby's like passing through the pelvic diaphragm, the middle of the pelvis, then we're thinking about what can we do to kind of create space for the baby on the bottom. And so sometimes with a peanut ball, there's a lot that you can do. For example, I'll just hop in this position like this. Say if your knees are apart, you can open up, you know, the pelvis. And there's lots of different positions that you can do in that way. And then for like the baby leaving the pelvis, if you think about like, let's see if I can hop onto the table, but like either positions where, let's go this way. Oops. Like,
this is the kind of party I want to come to.
Coming out, where you can be in positions where if you think knees together, so it's like open or out. So knees apart,
yeah,
come in and knees together to exit. And then different variations, of course, because we want to know which way the baby's needing to turn. Do I need to like give some space here? So maybe I'm doing like, you know, more of a lunge because I want this baby to rotate here. Or am I needing the baby to rotate in that direction? So, you know, we do want balance, but that doesn't mean to say we're robots. Our bodies are, there is asymmetry, and we sometimes want to work with that asymmetry to kind of help that baby to rotate. Depending on what's going on.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you're saying, and what you have to give is so important, because when we are talking about epidural rates above 90, and we are talking about, you know, worldwide, I don't know, it's early here, worldwide cesarean rates being at least 30 to 50%. And we're talking about, obviously, for that to be happening, the babies are in distress or the mothers are in distress. Then the wisdom that you have about being in a position that opens the pelvis and allows the baby to turn is so important, because that's going to be saving so many women, you know, from, you know, grave surgery, really. And things like the peanut ball, you know, you can use that during an epidural. There's nothing that says that you can't use that. So that's fantastic. I'm hoping that it really just becomes the normal thing, that if someone is having an epidural, they do have access to things like that water pillow or the peanut ball, so that they can work with their baby in the ways that you're showing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that there's a lot. But to go back to your question about like how to prepare. So ideally we work individually, but if it's a large group, then you're often thinking about like, what do I need to do to let the baby out? Because I think we often think is like, what can we do? But the idea is let the baby out. So it's about understanding all those muscles that connect up into the pelvic floor. So there are all these deep muscles like into the pelvic floor that we want to be able to get to be able to release. So I'll often in my classes give ideas of like, we'll start with the feet. I always start with the feet. Just like working just barefoot on different surfaces to kind of get to all those little nerve endings and proprioception in the bottom. That connects up into the pelvic floor. And then those calf muscles, you want to be able to, because during pregnancy, they get really tight. I want you to be able to and release those, and our hamstrings and our adductors, you know, and our glutes and the piriformis and obturator. So I have different size balls and things, and I'll give them ideas of what they can do, whether it's a lacrosse ball or a pinky ball. Some of them are really fun. So I always have lots of little balls that I work with, depending on where they're at, you know, and we'll start with softer and bigger and smaller and harder, and then we'll have work in different ways, and I'll have them do that throughout the third trimester, really. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love those massage balls. They've been a really good friend of mine since, having my first child and then needing to rehabilitate afterwards and finding out about these things. But anyone can have them at any time and just enjoy them. They're amazing.
What do you use yours for?
My ITBs get really, really tight, and it's from the pelvis being a bit wonky. And having talked to Lynn Schulte a few weeks ago, who was also talking on the seminar, I came to understand that probably my pelvis is still left in the open position, and I need to get the bones closed, because my pelvis just seems to do that, and that causes really tight ITBs. So it was at the point where after my son was about 4, I really I just couldn't even tackle stairs or hills or anything. So I was fortunate enough to find those lovely balls with ridges and then massage my ITBs and my hips. And, you know, now 10 years later, it's pretty much a non-issue. I work out and I run and everything all over again. So it's all good. Yeah.
So I think, you know, one has to also think about like what needs to be stabilized, what needs to be strengthened, and what needs to be released. So, you know, also strengthening the glutes and the hamstrings, but also as well as releasing, because they really stabilize also the pelvis.
Yes. There's all these things that open up post-birth that you never would have anticipated.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about healing a little bit? Do you want to talk a little bit about healing during the postpartum? Because that's another thing that you love to share about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a lot about talking about, I just lost your phone. It's a lot about talking about, you know, and preparing ahead of time. But I'll always tell my clients, like, you know, postpartum bodies come in a variety of ways. Second, did I lose you? I just lost you. No,
I'm here. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So they present in a variety of ways, and you can have a mom that's newly postpartum, you know, a few months, few years. She can be pregnant and postpartum. She can be in perimenopause and postpartum. Once postpartum, one's always postpartum, and once you've had a baby, then one is always at risk for a pelvic floor disorder. And we know that incontinence affects, you know, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 2 exercise. So, you know, just understanding that the excess force of directed pushing can result in weaker pelvic floor muscles, not always at the time, but often several months after birth. And the weakness in the pelvic floor muscles is associated with incontinence. So, I mean, I'm always referring to a pelvic floor physical therapist, a good pelvic floor physical therapist, that can help educate and give them knowledge. And, you know, 4 in 10 women will have a pelvic organ prolapse during their life. And we want to watch out for symptoms, you know, things like pain or feeling heaviness down there or leaking, and we don't want to push through those symptoms. The fascia that attaches to the bones help, you know, in the pelvic floor, help support the urethra, the vagina and the rectum by wrapping around those passages. And once the fascia is stretched or torn, it doesn't heal like it was before. So we can learn to strengthen and release. And there's a lot of work that can be done. But I think as much as we can prevent ahead of time, now things happen and life happens, of course. And so if there is damage, then, you know, we want to kind of wait and see too, and work on our, you know, our functional movement and our habits in terms of like looking at the whole body again. Like, you know, postpartum, nobody's sleeping, so I can't talk about sleep, but finding ways to really rest and restore on a really deep level and making nutrient dense choices, and adding things like bone broth and collagen and mineral-rich foods. And what I think that we can do as birth workers when we work with our moms is help them set up ahead of time a kind of web of support. Who's going to be taking care of you in different ways postpartum and on different levels. And, you know, and then in early postpartum, yeah, we're looking at bathroom habits and the way that we're moving, but to really, sometimes you don't know until like a few months postpartum or until you're really finished like breastfeeding because of the drop in the estrogen to really know. I think things like diastasis and all the knowledge now, people really like panic and freak out. And sometimes there's just an adjustment period. And of course, if there's any pain or if there's any discomfort, to see a woman's health physical therapist is really important. So I you know, here I have definitely built up my network of professionals that I can refer to, where they are body workers or pelvic floor physical therapists or great GYNs or just in different areas. And I would encourage, you know, the listeners to build your team that when you're working with them in different ways, like if you are like a fitness pro, that you have people that you can refer to. Because I think when we support moms, pregnant or postpartum or at any stage in life, or anybody really, is we want to also help build that team of support for that person. So, you know, it takes a village. So where was I? Oh,
postpartum.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, also working with them, I want to remind moms that they are strong and capable and adaptable and resilient, and meet them where they are at and offer real persistent support and find out what are their goals, what are their vision, what is it that they want to return to doing, and what's the next logical step for them, and help them achieve their goals by, you know, slowly introducing them to more activity or to more moderate or in high intensity, depending what they're doing, but always finding the progression, you know, and I think finding other ways to progress and develop. So we don't want to not do anything because then we're just a trophy, but we want to, yes, I mean, I'm a big advocate for, you know, the first few weeks. There's a great saying in the birth halls, it's like, you know, 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days next to the bed. And I think that there's a lot.
I love this. When do I get that? I'm gonna institute that as a policy.
And if you can't every 6 weeks, give yourself a timeout weekend where you just sleep, rest, hydrate. Like if you didn't do it then, you know, you always have time to restore. I mean, ideally we're supported at the time, but sometimes, you know, it's a privilege. You know, there's many, you know, women who give birth and they have to go right back to work. And, you know, I
right.
think that. I think really understanding, like in a lot of cultures, there's a lot of intergenerational support. So in some cultures, they know like it's 3 generations living together. And so there's automatically that support. There's someone cooking for that person. There's someone, if that person has to go to work, there's someone taking care of the child. But here, I don't know about Australia, but here in New York City, for sure, we're very isolated and distanced from families. I mean, maybe families are strange, but also, you know, I know for myself, I'm South African, my husband's from somewhere else. We don't have any family. So what often happens is if you want the support, you have to hire it, you have to pay for it. So it isn't that intergeneral support. And that's a little sad, I think. But how can we, you know, kind of recruit that? Yes, we rely on friends and neighbors, but it depends on where you are at and what kind of support systems you have. And I think to think about, you know, how can we, you know, make those changes where we are recruiting, like the grannies who maybe have retired. Can they take care of postpartum moms? Would they like to be able to come and, you know, hold the baby or, I don't know, rub some feet? I mean, it would be great to bring all the generations kind of back together, because we live in a world where, you know, I think you get to a certain age and then people are lost, but there's a great need for those people to come and take care of like new moms, you know. So Yeah, I think to be really realistic, of course, and then work with that. You know, what are our, you know, economically and things like that, what do we have available to us? But to make things aware, I think like what's really popular here in New York City are like meal trains is like one thing that people are doing, and that's really nice too. But I think just also educating like families about what's really happening, what's really expected, and what to really understand what the changes are in the family, both for both parents, or if it's one person or two people parenting, whatever the family is, if there's siblings involved, what are those changes that are going to happen? Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, of course, beginning to rebuild and rehab a strong and stable center and pelvic floor, because it's all interconnected. So teaching a lot about that, what the, you know, the whole core is and how it works together in a synergistic way. So there's a lot of education. And then I like to get my clients, you know, moving as soon as possible. And if they can't do something, that's the homework, and try and build closer to do that. We want to be able to do all the squats and do all the lunges and all the movements. I mean, sometimes people go like, oh, do I always have to hold my baby here? No, sometimes you have to hold the baby here, or sometimes here, or sometimes on your back, and sometimes on the front. We want to be able to do things in a variety of ways. I think that's important. Sometimes we tell, oh, you can't do that because of this. Okay, you might not be able to do it right now, but how can we get those little steps towards being able to do that? Yeah.
I love what you've said about the core working together synergistically. I think there's so much potential there in terms of ideas to unpack that and why that might be and how it works. But that's definitely the core of what you work at and your message, you know. It's very beautiful. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where we can follow you on social media, or come and visit your online shop?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website, Chantal Traub, so it's my name and last name.com. I'm on Facebook with Chantal Traub, and I have a page which is Pushing Power. And then I also have a Facebook group called Pushing Power Community, where I can go in there, and I'm inviting everyone to come and join and ask questions, because that's a great place to have your questions answered, whether it's early postpartum or in perimenopause. And then I'm on Instagram, Chantal Traub. So, and of course, email is a good way too.
Yeah. Beautiful. Do you offer online courses as well, or is it just something that you do in the New York area?
I'm putting something together, and I hope it will be out in 2020. I have not carved out the time to get it together. I'm a full-time active doula, and I teach a lot of classes here in New York City. But I've been requested so often already that I have the footage. I just have to put it together. So that's something.
Beautiful.
Email me, or anybody's interested, just shoot me an email and I'll let you know when it's ready.
Yes, come and share it probably in the Learning to Birth Facebook group, or just send it to me and I can let people know about it as well when it's out there. It takes a lot of work to get courses out there, I know. So
yeah, but it's a thing. I'm a little old-fashioned. Yeah, but I know it's the way. I have people reaching out all the time from other countries and other states, and like, I'm like, I do work one-on-one. I do a lot of mentoring, and I do some coaching in different varieties, whether it's a couple of sessions or a 3-month package where I'll work with a person like over Zoom or FaceTime. So there's always that if somebody wants a consultation. But I will let you know when the course is available.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us, Chantal. And it's been a really enjoyable conversation. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciated the in-depth demonstration of the subtlety of changes that the baby has to go through as it comes through the pelvis, and then all the different ways that we can be in tune with our bodies to kind of, open that pelvis up. I think that's all really important to know. And I think we need to know that our bodies are a dynamic thing. We get stuck in our head and we think that our bodies are just a lump of meat, but really they're acting, they're shifting and changing all the time, and they're very fluid, and we can listen to them a lot more and work with them and have a great partnership in the ways that you're teaching, which I think is really beautiful. And before you go, I guess you just kind of piqued my interest there, the whole idea of, the core working synergistically. Do you want to maybe tell us how you would envisage our lives would change if we were able to be in a state where we were in that dynamic state of our core working in synergy? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I teach about breathing, we'll start with the breath, because the breath is everything. We're born with our breath.
Oh, yeah.
We leave with our breath. And I always tell my clients that breath will tell you where you are. A breath is the way through the contractions. So whenever you get stuck, come back to your breath and find yourself and start again. So our breath is really important. And I often think of our breath, as we inhale, our lungs expand, and as we exhale, they deflate. And then we inhale, our lungs expand side, side, and exhaling, they deflate. And when you inhale, we want to think about our lungs expanding top, bottom, and front, back. So very three-dimensionally, breathing in and out. So as we inhale, ideally that takes up space, right? And remember, the pelvic floor has to manage intra-abdominal pressure, right, inside. So between the breathing diaphragm and the pelvic floor, there's a lot of movement. But when we inhale, for example, our lungs full. So ideally, we want our pelvic floor to release gently. And then as we exhale, our pelvic floor just comes to neutral. Inhale, our lungs expand. Belly soft, pelvic floor releases slightly, and then when we exhale, pelvic floor comes back to neutral as our lungs deflate and our belly kind of draws slightly in. Does that make sense? So there's this inhaling to expand. You can put your hands on your belly or on your diaphragm. Inhale to expand, and then just keep an eye on your sit bones there. Notice as you inhale, notice if your sit bones just widen slightly, and as you exhale, the bones just draw slightly in, belly comes back, lungs deflate. Inhale. Feel the lungs expand, belly softens, sit bones widen slightly, or even think about tailbone and pubis just moving gently away. And as you exhale, slightly draw in, and belly comes back in, and diaphragm deflates. Now, for example, if I wanted to get up off the chair and I wanted to support myself, anytime really in my life, like I would inhale, and then as I exhale, I would like lean into my feet, and I would incorporate, I would recruit my pelvic floor to lift to support me to come up. Inhale, you can feel the sit bones expand. Exhale, they draw in and up. Inhale to expand. Exhale, joint in and up. So that kind of way is your pelvic floor contraction. But we want to think about that in terms of if we're going to pick a baby up, and down the line, if everything's functioning well and kind of connecting, we don't have to overthink it all the time. We're just doing it. But in the beginning, when we wanted to fire up all those connections, we have to think about it. So say I'm going to pick up my baby, and it's going to be a heavier baby right after it's born than this, but I would let's imagine that I was going to pick up the baby, big baby. Okay, so I would then think bringing the baby nice and close. I would inhale to expand, and then I would use my pelvic floor and my abdominals to support me to lift up. So I'm not putting all that pressure into my weight, into my back. Do you understand? So in that way, I would engage. And I often, will teach how to do a proper pelvic floor contraction. I'm happy to go through one with you as well. But so here's a fun one, for example. So does that make sense? Just how the lungs deflate. So our pelvic floor has to manage that intra-abdominal pressure. And then if we pick something up, or if I were to jump, right, or to lunge, like the pelvic floor has to move in a lot of dynamic ways. So we're not symmetrical all the time. When I lunge, say if I'm going to lunge, this sit bone is opening. I want my pelvic floor to be able to do that. Or if I'm going to squat in this way, my sit bones are going together. What happens if I want to do like not a plie, but a squat like that? Then my sit bones are widening. If I'm doing a plie, I'm doing that. Or if I'm jumping. So the pelvic floor has to manage, or if I'm coughing, you know, the pelvic floor has to be able to manage that. So we definitely want our pelvic floor to be able to go through all its functions. We want it to do a proper pelvic floor contraction. We want it to be able to be at rest. We want it to be able to release. And we want it to be able to do a proper puff, if you will, a proper strain, if you have to. So it needs to be able to go through all those different functions in an optimal way. So, for example, if we were wanting to do a pelvic floor contraction, I'll start with, like, imagine that you have a grain of rice on your chair. And we want to inhale to expand our pelvic floor. So think about the sit bones, broad in, belly soft. And then as you exhale, you want to think about picking up that grain of rice with your urethra and drawing in and up towards your navel or towards the crown of your head. Inhale, just put it down. Now imagine that there's a blueberry on your seat. We're going to pick that up with our vagina. Inhale to expand. Exhale, think about picking up that blueberry, draw it in and up towards your navel, towards the crown of your head. And then inhale, put it down. Now think of green pea on your seat. You're going to inhale to expand. And as you exhale, think about lifting that pea with your anus in and up towards the crown of your head. And then inhale, put it down. Now let's do all three. Just get ready. We'll take an inhale to expand. And as we exhale, we're going to pick up that grain of rice, the blueberry, the pea. Lift it in and up and hold. And then inhale, gently put them down one at a time. Let's try the other way. We're going to go pea, blueberry, grain of rice. So inhale here. Exhale, think about picking up that pea, the blueberry, the grain of rice, and lifting in and up. And then inhale, putting it down. So I think learning how to do, you know, a proper pelvic floor contraction and then release. So you ask, what can we do to prepare to release for birth? So sometimes I'll actually have my clients do what positions that they can lengthen, like say the pelvic floor. So for example, if I was hanging on to, can you see me? I would be like in a position like this, where I can feel the posterior part of the pelvic floor lengthening. And in this position, I will have my clients do this position, like, or hang on to a doorknob or a rope in that position, not going deeper than the knees. So not a full squat, staying above the knees, because if we don't know towards the end of the pregnancy, if we don't know the position of the baby, I don't really want them coming into a deep squat, because remember what happens to the pelvis. So not going deep, I'm just talking about the last 3 weeks, like from 37 weeks. Before that, during the pregnancy, you can squat. But if the baby's in an optimal position, yes, go deeper, but until then. But when you feel that length, I'll have them lie in the back in like a goddess position, you know, like soles of the feet together in the warm water, and then just practice inhale to expand, exhale, release. Inhale to expand, and exhale, just release it. So not the drawing up, just relaxing, because the warm water actually helps those muscles soothe. And then, you know, being able to know, like, what's a proper strain, what's a proper, like, puff down. So imagine that, for example, you're wanting to fart, for example, you can feel the pelvic floor go down the back. And then imagine if you're trying to, like, push out your pee, which one shouldn't do, you know, push, like you can feel that descend. So knowing, because what I've noticed at births, for example, like clients that I've worked with a lot, I know the perineums are very well prepared because I give them a lot of preparation to do. Like, so for example, I'll give you this one example. I had a client and I knew her perineum was really well prepared, and she was beginning to push, But every time she pushed, and I kept saying, do you want to try this position, that position? She was like, no, I like to be here. So she was choosing to be in that position, but every time she pushed, she would pull up. And I would give her a different cue, but every time she pushed, she would pull up, which is understandable. You've got a head coming down. So the tendency sometimes is to draw up. And then her OB actually said to her, you know what, this is going to take a while. I'm going to go, I'll come back in a couple of hours. And I was like, no way, a couple of hours? No, this is not going to take a couple of hours. So she left, and I was just thinking like, okay, I've tried all my cues. And then I said to her, you know, just put your hands on your sit bones, and on your next contraction, just try and push down and move your hands away, like on your sit bones. And in the next, the next contraction, her perineum just whoosh, it bulged. And in the next contraction, there was like, whoosh. And the nurse looked at me with like saucer eyes, and I was like, I'm right away to my client. Okay, blow, look at me blow. And this baby's just doing this. And the nurse is looking at me with saucer eyes. I said to her, if you're not going, you can catch that baby. I'm standing right here. Others go call, you know, the OB. And she ran to the back of the room and pressed like the internal intercom and said, Dr. So-and-so, if you want to deliver this baby, come into this room now. And as she came in, this baby was just oozing out. Like, I think it was like almost by the ears when she walked in. It was just a matter of that release. Like her own pulling up was holding her back. And as soon as she was able to like pop, like just let that go, it just bulged so beautifully. And then baby slid across the perineum, and there it was. It was amazing. And that just reaffirms, like, just to be able to try and let go. It's so hard. Sometimes I see my clients really, their adductors are so tight. And I'm like massaging their legs, and until they can really get loosey-goosey, then the baby just comes. It's so interesting. So that's why sometimes standing or squatting or walking when you're bearing down, if it's tightening up the legs, then it's better to like maybe be on hands and knees or side lie. You want to relax everything there so that the perineum can just go.
I just heard the word massage and I'm off.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes just like, you know, massaging those legs because they get so tight, like during second stage. So if there's any fathers out there, you can support your birthing person by just reminding them to relax these legs they touch, just to relax. Everything from below the navel, just let it go.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's been beautiful talking, Chantal. Oh, I just love this conversation about, you know, the stories of your babies that you've been present for and the wonderful births that they've had. And oh my gosh, I'm just thinking that, you know, anyone who's got you as their educator and doula is so lucky and fortunate. And I'm hoping that, you know, that the hospitals that these people have birthed in, maybe they got to see something different happen as well and had their horizons expand about how you can work with mama and baby as a dynamic kind of system, and rather than something that has to be acted upon, you can work with them. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for being with us today, Chantal.
My pleasure. It's really been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really hope that you get your course out there on the internet and you get to talk about all these things to a much wider audience, and hopefully, of course, lots of people come and watch this webinar too. So thank you everyone today for joining us on the Learning to Birth webinar series. You've been talking to Chantal Traub, and your website is chantaltraub.com.
Yeah, my name and last name.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.